Hello and welcome to Catholic Answers Live. I'm Cy Kellett, your host. Happy Black Friday. I hope that you have not suffered any terrible injuries or wounds, or that you have not injured others in your quest for merchandise. Very, very happy to get to be here with you. We like having shows on those days where, you know, the world is off. Maybe you're not familiar with Catholic Answers because you're getting to listen today. Usually you're at work at this time, or you have other responsibilities during this time. If you're new to Catholic Answers, you can find out all about us at Catholic.com. And all we do is explain and defend the Catholic faith. That's it. And we're going to have some fun this hour because sometimes on Fridays, we do what we call the panel show. And we talk to the panel and we look at the news of the world and the news of the church from a Catholic perspective. And that's what we're going to do for a couple hours. So we get two very smart and really fun people to do that with us. First, the president of Catholic Answers, Chris Check. Hi, Chris Check.
Cy, thank you for having me.
Happy Black Friday.
I laughed when you said that.
I don't know if you're supposed to observe this as Black Friday or as part of the octave of Thanksgiving.
I'm going to probably offend, as I typically do. Yeah. This is a day I do not pay attention to at all.
Black Friday?
I tried entirely to pretend it's not happening.
Well, when do you get to trample people? Like when do you get your trampling in?
Yeah, I feel like I've done enough of that.
Okay.
In my life.
Our other guest for this hour is apologist, author, speaker extraordinaire, Joe Heschmeyer. Hi, Joe.
How you doing?
Happy Black Friday, Joe.
Yeah, I also don't really celebrate Black Friday. I get all of my stuff on Black Thursday. No, I'm just kidding. Actually, have you heard this?
Wait, there's a Black
Thanksgiving Black Thursday? Oh, yeah, it's terrible. It's like, rather than being thankful, what if you were covetous?
Yeah. Let's do the opposite of Thanksgiving. I don't like any shopping on Thanksgiving because the workers. We used to have some sense in America. It's the day for everyone to be with their family. Let them go home. What do you all think about that?
I think we did have some sense in America. It was in the early part of the 19th century.
In the early part of the 19th
and before.
Century? Well, we didn't have Thanksgiving then, though.
When did it?
Well, you couldn't have holidays because there was no telephones.
I thought Thanksgiving was sometime in Massachusetts. You know?
Oh no, Thanksgiving is a post Civil War holiday.
No, it's the real Thanksgiving I'm speaking of.
Oh, the real
where Squanto taught the pilgrims how to grow crops.
When the people who
Chris, I gotta say, I'm kind of surprised you're not one of those people who says the real Thanksgiving is down in Florida with the first mass.
Oh,
there was a massive Thanksgiving before the
at St. On St. Augustine.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, right.
Well, yeah, there was the event, but the event is separate from the later efforts to bring the country together after the Civil War.
Of the holiday.
Yeah, right. And the myth of America, the great myth of America, a place of religious tolerance.
Myths are important.
Yes, that's right. I can't see Joe, by the way, but they're going to help me with that. Okay. So what we do, Joe Heschmeyer, in case you don't remember this, I know Chris will remember because he's done this many, many times. I think we've gotten to do it with you once. I tell you,
once or twice, Joe, just once.
Have you done this more than once?
I've done it twice.
You've done the panel show twice?
I remember, Joe.
Oh, well,
Thanks, Chris.
Yeah. I thought okay, all right, Joe, you've done this twice, and I'm super happy that we now you're on your.
It's the tryptophan.
Your third. Yeah, I know. Is that tryptophan thing? By the way, I think the tryptophan thing is a myth too. I think the reason you fall asleep is because you just gorged on food.
Can I say another myth?
Yeah.
Turkey tastes good. That's a myth.
Ooh.
I don't think anybody likes turkey. I think every single person is faking it. Although I am a dark meat person.
Yes, of course.
Because
the breast is inedible because it tastes like sawdust.
What is it? It's the. What do you think, Joe? Are you
I'm going to go a little further and say seasonal foods I'm skeptical of. Now, let me put it in two categories.
What does that even mean?
There are seasonal foods that are seasonal because they're only available that time of year. That's not really true of turkeys. Turkeys live year round. So
I thought the turkeys just ripened up in November. And that's
exactly.
I thought they started falling off the turkey trees in November.
They're like avocados, giant, juicy avocados.
Yeah.
But I feel the same way about pumpkin spice anything. If it was good, it'd be available year round. So I'm skeptical of seasonal foods.
No, Darren disagrees with you, I think. How do you feel about pumpkin spice, Darren? No, he says no. I am a big pumpkin spice fan.
You mean like in your coffee?
In everything. Just everything. Make ice cream, salad, whatever.
I would really encourage listeners to send angry emails to
About the
Cy.
pumpkin spice.
So first of all, I think
Conference.
putting anything in your coffee is probably at least a venial sin. But just to the whole thing of seasonal foods, Joe, you can't be serious. I mean, there are, if I understand you correctly, you're objecting to the how do I put this? Manufactured seasonal foods.
Yes,
because
yes,
because
exactly.
there are. You probably shouldn't be eating strawberries in February.
See, yeah, those are ones. And actually, this is where I'm going to pull up the snobby "I lived in Italy" card. Foods that you have to flash freeze to eat year round. There, you've killed the flavor.
I would
So
just like
those
to
deserve
say,
be eaten
I'm
fresh.
sorry to all of our listeners in the Southern Hemisphere. Thousands of people listen across the Southern, and it's perfectly appropriate for them to eat strawberries in February.
Well, then we've
Feasts are
also
local.
subjected them to a lengthy discussion about the strictly American feast of Thanksgiving.
Wait a second. We're the
Canadians
only ones that do
Thanksgiving
Wait,
on Columbus Day.
do the Australians not thank anyone? Do the Chileans not thank anyone? I mean, if I was an Australian, I'd want to say thank you to someone for making me an Australian. If I lived in the Andes, I'd want to say thank you, Lord, for making me an Andean, Chilean.
Pumpkins are a seasonal food.
Oh, he's just moving on from that.
Pumpkins are a seasonal food, and pumpkin pie is good.
Yeah, pumpkin pie is very good.
So,
Yeah.
so a literally seasonal food where God made it seasonal.
Amen.
I'm fine. I'm fine with that.
God made it
I-
seasonal.
Starbucks makes it seasonal. I'm skeptical.
Right, very good.
Have you ever thought you were getting pumpkin pie and you accidentally got sweet potato pie?
Oh, I have not. But I
That's
can
an
only
upsetting
imagine.
moment.
That
That is an
sounds like
upsetting
oatmeal
moment.
raisin debacle escalated.
Do you know what people around the world call sweet potatoes? Potatoes. In America, we call them sweet potatoes.
What's the difference between a sweet potato and a yam?
The something to do with Popeye, but that's all I know. Other than that, do you know?
that was bad.
Was that
Darren
a
thought
yam?
that was funny. I am what I am.
Not even
I don't
Joe
know.
would have. Oh, now that you have to
No,
explain
that was beneath even me.
We have so much news to cover.
I don't
And
know. Why don't we just keep going like this?
I know it is fun getting to talk with the two of you. All right, so I hadn't thought about that. I said Black Friday, and it's probably like Black Friday perhaps is a purely American holiday, and I use the word holiday loosely. The worship
Holiday,
of material
a word
things.
derived from holy day, we're now using for strictly commercial feasts.
Although I completely understand the impulses of Black Friday, I am not a person who could get himself up off the couch and go fight for that $11 laptop at Walmart. I want the $11 laptop at Walmart. I completely understand the impulse. My opposition is pure laziness.
I don't want the $11 laptop.
You guys have deeper, I feel like you have an anti-materialist, spiritual reason, and I don't. I would gladly pay $11 for the laptop, and I would probably even enjoy the fight, but I just can't get myself off the couch to do it.
I like that you have vices competing with other vices.
Is it my materialism or my violence that I'm enjoying? Hell, it's a combination. It's a special day.
But ultimately, sloth wins the day.
Yeah, sloth. That could actually be a banner over my office chair. The sloth wins the day. That's the theme of almost every day of my life. I can't believe I'm saying this with the boss sitting right here. Can I have a raise?
Yes. And I might add, on the radio.
Yeah, right. All right. There's serious stuff to talk about, but I feel like I can't transition right into the serious stuff. Okay, so I'm going to go with the because I get to choose which order we do the stories in. I'm going to go with the elephant.
Yes.
Do you want to talk about the elephant?
I do.
Did you both read the Atlantic magazine article about the Atlantic?
I read some.
Can I say I
did?
didn't make my way through the whole thing?
Well, that's probably okay. Few people do make it through an Atlantic magazine article all the way to the end, but
From time to time, there's something good in the Atlantic.
remember when they used to have that guy? He died in Iraq, I think, but he was a great editor for Atlantic magazine. I can't remember his name now, but he made it a great magazine, and then he died, and then it's just.
I mean, the quality of
it's
the
the same
prose in
stuff.
the Atlantic is better than most magazines.
Yes, I think
Yes,
that's true. It's like the
absolutely.
New Yorker without the complete madness.
Right.
Okay, so now that I've categorized the Atlantic Monthly, one of the great publications in the history of America, by the way.
It's been around for a very long time.
Yeah, I think it might even
Since
have been
the
Civil
19th
War.
century, sure.
Yeah. Okay, so the elephant. Let me just describe the elephant story. By the way, I just want to say this as well before we get into this elephant has a more dramatic, exciting, and interesting biography than any of us, than any of the three of us who will now discuss the elephant. But the question about this elephant who is currently in, am I getting it right, the Bronx Zoo? Or is it the Central Park Zoo? The Bronx Zoo. Is that this elephant is the subject of a court case in which the question arises, is the elephant a person or not? Discuss.
So I want to flag that when we're talking about person here, there's a really unfortunate conflation of terms.
Yes.
And The Atlantic sort of points to this, that they say a person is something of a legal fiction. Under U.S. law, a corporation can be a person, so can a ship. And Justice Douglas, in 1972, in a dissenting opinion, argued that we should also allow nature to be a legal person.
Yeah.
He specified valleys, alpine meadows, rivers, lakes, estuaries.
You're both a theologian and a lawyer. So what does this – just explain to me why, for example, Walmart is a person under the law.
So this is one of those things where I see people get this wrong all the time because it was like 2010, everyone was saying, oh, the Supreme Court just declared corporations are people. And it's like, guys, literally 1 USC 1, the very first law in the code defines person and includes corporations. And the reason is really simple, that you want corporations to be able to act. So if Catholic Answers does something, we want it to be able to have the ability to do things like own property, where it isn't just all of us owning property together or Chris owning property on his own, that it needs to have a certain legal standing. So, I mean, for instance, Carl Keating founded Catholic Answers. He's able to pass the torch without a really complicated legal process of having to sell the building to Chris or something like that. So to allow kind of a continuous corporate presence that's distinct from any one of the people, that's why corporations exist. There's actually a little bit of form and matter thing going on there. The famous ship of Theseus thought experiment.
Right.
That, if you replace every panel of the ship and then build another ship with it, which one's the original ship? Well, likewise, if every member of Catholic Answers were to, go join Catholic Questions or something down the block, Catholic Answers would remain with new employees as a distinct entity, and all of its assets and all of its liabilities would stay with it rather than with, Catholic Questions or any of the employees.
All right. So the question then becomes, first, I guess there's two questions that arise. Is this a good way to think about, to use a good use of the word person in American law? But secondly, what does this have to do with an elephant in the Bronx Zoo? But I was having so much fun, I forgot that I have to take a break. So I'm sorry, Chris.
Go.
We'll be right back.
The elephant will not forget what we were talking about.
You always go right to the elephant in the room, Joe. We'll be right back with more
Nice.
Catholic Answers Live, Black Friday panel discussion edition right after this.
Catholic Answers Live.
Do you have a question but prefer to ask it privately? Catholic Questions can help. Go to CatholicQuestions.com to ask your question online, email us, drop us a letter, or give us a call. Longtime Catholic Answers Live apologist and author Jim Blackburn or another Catholic Questions apologist will be happy to assist you. Catholic Questions proudly supports Catholic Answers Live, so visit us at CatholicQuestions.com today. That's CatholicQuestions.com.
EWTN has its own official YouTube channel with tens of thousands of videos covering just about every conceivable topic of interest to Catholics. And, best of all, it's free. Every day, EWTN adds new TV shows, live events, devotionals, homilies, and specials to its YouTube channel. Visit the EWTN YouTube channel today. EWTN, the Global Catholic Network.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live panel show today, where we look at the world, the news in the world, the news of the church from a Catholic perspective with our president, Chris Check, and with apologist, writer, and speaker extraordinaire, also former practicing attorney, Joe Heschmeyer. We'll go back to that conversation. Right now we're talking about, is an elephant a person? Can an elephant be a person? That's actually something that a United States court is being asked to decide right now. Before I send you back there, at shop.catholic.com, we've got lots of Black Friday deals for you, and you don't even have to knock somebody over to get them. Just go to shop.catholic.com. It's all these magnificent special deals, and it's right up till midnight Hawaii time. Midnight Hawaii time, shop.catholic.com. Chris, I believe Joe explained to us the idea in U.S. law, and maybe this is not unique to U.S. law. I don't know.
Well, sure, Joe. It must have some origin in British law as well. I mean, I understand, and I agree with, in fact, the way that you've described. For example, that a corporation has an existence independent of the staff, for example. Also, this means that corporations can be liable. And
Yes.
so there are protections for the staff, or even for the executives or the trustees or something like that.
Right, so that
That's actually one of the really controversial parts about it, though, because
Right.
you can have things like, ExxonMobil spilling a bunch of oil, and then the individual executives and all the employees are legally off the hook. The company foots the bill. So if you want to, take your golden parachute and get out of there when, the going gets tough,
Well,
you can actually avoid a lot of liability that way.
But this does in fact make the modern world possible, because you couldn't engage in large corporate efforts where people pool their funds and pool their efforts to do things like, I don't know, like whatever Elon Musk is up to right now. I'm sure there's enormous liability that comes with shooting rockets off. I mean, there's got to be enormous liability with that. No one's going to say, well, I'll invest my $100 in SpaceX if part of that investment includes I have a personal liability if SpaceX takes out a Pacific island with one of these things.
And we're especially litigious now, so these protections are good.
Yeah.
But I mean, we're making a distinction here between how we need to make the distinction between how the legal system functions, and it seems to me in a sensible way here, and whether a thing has a moral claim.
The thing being the animal, this elephant?
Well, an elephant, a piece of a valley, a piece of land.
Oh, I see. Yes,
a mountain. Because you mentioned that as well, Joe. You said that they're
Justice Douglas has a pretty famous or notorious claim about arguing nature should be a legal person.
Right.
Okay, but
we're talking about a moral claim. Moral claims.
If I could just back up, why can't we just use a different word than person? Because, and maybe this was not always the case, but I think it was always the case that humans have been struggling over what is a person. I mean, they come to the Americas and we struggle over, is the local guy a person, or is the local guy not a person in the same way a Spaniard is? We go to Africa, and is the African guy a person? And then you resolve those issues with great deal of effort because there's money involved in getting the wrong answer. And now we're arguing over, is the unborn child a person?
Everything is a person except an unborn child.
Yeah, right. Now everything in the world is right. So the elephant is a person, but the unborn child is. I don't want to live in that world. So why not use a different word for person when I'm talking about Walmart or Catholic Answers or a ship at sea?
Yeah, it's a good point. The plural makes it a little clearer that when we're talking about the legal person, the plural is persons. When we're talking about metaphysical, theological, moral person, and the plural is people.
Except if we're talking about the Trinity.
Yes, that's true, which is actually the original use of person in the sense that we're kind of talking about. Actually, can I go on a really nerdy tangent? I'm going to.
You should.
Personare means to speak through. And so there's a belief that the word person actually comes from the Etruscan word for mask. And so in ancient Greek theater, or Greco-Roman theater, you would speak through a mask and take on what we would now call a persona, that the actor would play a role. And so person originally didn't mean an individual nature of a rational substance or not rational subsistence. It meant like a role that you played. So using person for the Trinity it took a lot of redefinition of the term to make sure that we didn't fall into modalism. Modalism is the idea that God acts as the Father and as the Son and as the Holy Spirit, but he's not actually three separate persons.
Right.
He's just one person in three different roles. That is how, someone 300 years before Boethius might have understood three persons. That's not at all, of course, maybe 1,000 years before Boethius, that's not at all what we're trying to say with person. So person has, for a very long time, been a really controversial term.
Well, first of all, just so people know, the definition that you gave of person comes from the philosopher Boethius, who has never been topped as far as the definition of a person, which is an individual substance of a rational nature. Secondly, it always amuses me when you say, can I be nerdy for a minute? Like, what do you think you're doing all the other minutes, Joe? Like, that always amazes me. Oh, yeah, for a minute, I'm going to stop being cool, Joe, and be nerdy, Joe. All right.
So, that's a good point.
So,
you want to talk about Catholic theology for a second?
So the rationality, by its nature, confers on the person claims, certain moral claims or rights.
But it has to be an individual
I try not to use
substance
that word if I can. But
of a rational nature.
Yeah.
So that means that the angels, for example, are not collectively a person. The angels are individually a person because they're rational. And so we don't get our personhood from our ability to reason, but from our nature as individuals made to reason.
Yeah. So let's use this word because I don't have another one. But the word is rights, and we talk about animal rights a great deal.
Right.
But are there such a thing
as animal rights?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's really tricky to say that there are such things. I know Trent Doherty, I think at Notre Dame, wrote a book from a Catholic perspective on what obligations do we owe to animals. And there seems to be some moral obligation not to, for instance, torture animals needlessly. And it's hard to explain why that's immoral without some sense of you're violating the dignity of the animal.
Sure.
Even if that dignity is limited not to being needlessly tortured.
Sure.
So in that limited sense, they're kind of rights holders.
And in the torturing of the animal, of course, the torturer is harming himself by his evil act, and so that's an important consideration.
But you have to be very careful about ascribing rights to animals, because the rights that each and every human being has at every stage of life, whatever the condition of that life, are related to the fact of the human being a good in itself, that is an end in itself, and that the animal never possesses that. So whatever rights the animal has, to me, I would say, my argument would be, Joe, they're related to the care of the Creator in making the animal. That is, I don't have the right to treat in a cruel or unnecessarily negating way what the Creator has taken such care to make beautiful and good and delightful. Is that for the animal's good? Yes, but primarily it has to do with the Creator and not defacing it. It's like the Mona Lisa doesn't have any rights, but it would be such a grave insult to Western culture, which produced that work via the person of Leonardo, that you cannot deface that thing. You cannot treat it in a way that doesn't comport with what it is.
Right.
Yeah, if you filled in the Grand Canyon and made it a parking lot, the Grand Canyon obviously is not a rights holder, but it still stands to reason that something of the created order is being violated there.
Right.
And I actually think that's the easiest, like, in a way, we can sort of punt on the issue of what rights, if any, does a non-rational animal have, by just saying we have an obligation to treat things in their proper order and respect them appropriately, because we are rational creatures.
So is this helpful, Joe and Cy, or not, in the conversation about rights? And again, for me, it's a complicated word, especially because So much of it is tied up in Enlightenment philosophy and the revolution that follows it. But is it part of the conversation to ask the question that if someone is going to make a claim, or a person is going to make a claim to rights, he's doing it of his own accord, and so, for example, a valley can't make this claim, or an elephant. But then the other is he has the capacity, at least potentially, to enforce them.
Okay, yeah. I see what
I
you're
think
saying.
the obvious danger there would be the unborn, who can't, file lawsuits themselves.
Correct,
So
but
people file them on their own.
potentially.
Yes, they do have the
Right.
potency, but they don't have the standing as such yet.
Isn't that a critical part of this definition?
And we got to get to whether this a particular elephant is a person right after this on Catholic Answers Live.
Here's a question. Is it really possible to be friends with someone who died 2,000 years ago? Maybe the problem is that we've grown way too comfortable with the story of Jesus. Nice man, right? Taught us to love one another, said not to judge people. We celebrate his birthday every year. It's time to put away this small, safe version of Jesus, says Cy Kellett. Nobody that bland could have transformed the world. In A Teacher of Strange Things, Cy presents Jesus Christ undiluted by sentiment, with all his radical words and deeds uncensored. Do you know someone, your son or daughter perhaps, or maybe your mom or dad, who needs the friendship of Jesus Christ? Do you? Order your copy of A Teacher of Strange Things by visiting shop.catholic.com today or asking for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you. Have you enrolled in the Catholic Answers School of Apologetics? Let me ask you a more important question. Do you believe as a Catholic that you have an obligation to share the Catholic faith? In fact, the Church has answered this question, and the answer is that all confirmed Catholics are obliged to share the faith. It's actually in canon law. Catholic Answers is here to help you fulfill that obligation. Our School of Apologetics courses will equip you to help all the people you come in contact with understand what the Church teaches and why. A great place to start is with all the Catholics in your life. Learn the art of apologetics from the best of the best and start sharing the gospel today. Visit schoolofapologetics.com. That's schoolofapologetics.com.
Did you know you can access Catholic Answers Live right from your phone or other mobile device? Download the Catholic Answers Live app today. The Catholic Answers Live app, available now on iOS and Android.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. I'm Cy Kellett, your host. It's a panel conversation for both hours, getting the Catholic perspective on the news of the day, whether that is the news of the world or the news of the Church in particular. And I didn't tease this before, and I should have said this. It has now become a tradition of these Friday panel shows that I play some wacky audio from National Public Radio. And I will be doing that later and getting your comment on a news report from National Public Radio. So I want you both to know.
I want to stress that we don't know what this is about.
No, this is it will become as a complete surprise to you. And maybe you will not find it wacky at all. Maybe you'll say, no, that's perfectly reasonable reporting from National Public Radio.
I think you should get combat pay for listening to
National Public Radio. Oh, man.
I was thinking he had too easy of a job finding them saying something weird on National
Well, that's the
Public Radio.
thing. I listen
He
for
just
about
turned
5
his radio
minutes a
on in the
month, and
morning.
I find the strangest things. Well, it's not hard to find these things, but I have to say I get a little twinkle in my eye when I'm driving in the car and they start, and I'm like, oh, this one's going to be for Joe and Chris. So I think I have a good one for you today.
Cy, I think you've solved the elephant problem with your observation in the previous segment, and it's this. Apart from the created order and the understanding that there is, in fact, a creator and that in his creation there are various orders of things, apart from that, we immediately descend into all kinds of philosophical and legal chaos. And that's exactly what's happening in the case of this elephant. Now, I think an interesting conversation might be to have with this lady who wrote the piece. What does the dignified and not cruel treatment of an elephant constitute? And I would be prepared to say that the little 1 acre space that elephant is contained in without the company of other elephants probably constitutes some level of cruelty.
Yeah.
But that's a different thing from saying that the animal of itself has rights in the way that a rational creature does.
I think the word dignity there probably is the right one rather than rights. That we ought to respect the dignity of animals. We ought to respect the dignity even of creation itself.
And that
totally
dignity,
non-rational, totally non-sentient.
That dignity that we respect derives from, as I observed, the fact that this is something that God created.
Right, and created so beautifully. I mean, an elephant
for our use and not abuse.
When you think about everything else in the universe, and in almost every square inch of the universe, as far as we know it, an elephant far surpasses almost all of it. I mean, there are very few things that have the intricacy, the craftsmanship, so to speak, the beauty of an elephant. And you could say that about any animal walking around on this earth. But in particular, as you get into the higher animals,
I heard a blind guy say that an elephant was just like a rope.
I heard him say, all right.
So
but wait, I just would like to point to an irony. Do you guys know who said the following sentence, one of the greatest pro-life sentences ever uttered? A person's a person, no matter how small.
Yeah, Dr. Seuss.
No, that was Horton the elephant who said that.
Good point.
So if elephants are pro-life, I say, give them all.
I like that you're giving not just personality to elephants, but literally fictional elephants.
Fictional according to you.
Elephants are very famously part of Hannibal's Italian campaign, but the truth is he lost about half of them coming through the Alps, and then they featured in one battle in northern Italy, but most of that decade-long campaign up and down the Italian peninsula in the Second Punic War, he didn't have them.
What he did have was one of the greatest military minds in the history of the world.
He did, and he had a lot of resolve.
Yeah.
Yes.
And a lot of Romans who had my philosophy at the time. Sloth wins the day.
Martha Delinda est.
No. Okay,
well, they had patience.
I feel like Happy the elephant. I want to be. Okay, I keep getting distracted, but Chris said the lady who wrote this article, and I think that's because Chris assumes that anyone who defends the personhood of an elephant would be a lady, but it was Brandon Keim who wrote the article. So
I thought it was Jill Lepore.
Oh, am I reading that?
I think it actually is a lady.
No, it is a lady.
Oh, no, I'm looking
at
at
the article.
You know what? There are 2 elephant articles at The Atlantic, and we might be talking about 2. The Atlantic is on a real elephant personhood campaign. So I didn't realize this was a whole thing.
I
apologize, Chris.
In Lepore's article that I think really puts a bow on the earlier point you were making, that it's really problematic to refer to this legal standing as personhood, because she says a person is something of a legal fiction. Under U.S. law, a corporation can be a person. And 4 sentences later, she says, pro-life activists have argued that embryos and fetuses are persons. Yes. But that's we're using person in a totally equivocal sense here.
Right.
Yeah.
Pro-lifers are not saying that an embryo is a person in the way that the Yurok tribe says the Klamath River is a person. We're saying a person is a person literally, that it is literally an individual who has a rational nature.
I think Jill and I can come to the same conclusions about this elephant, but mine or ours is from a conduit of rationality, and hers is largely based on emotion.
That's right. The elephant is a sweet elephant that suffered a great deal.
Yes, it was separated from its aunts and uncles and cousins.
Yeah, and the science that she gives is that this elephant can recognize itself in a mirror. So clearly it has self-awareness, which, I mean, what a fascinating field, animal consciousness, for both philosophers and scientists. But the fact that the elephant recognizes itself in a mirror is not dispositive of whether or not this is the equivalent of a human being. To pretend that it is so silly.
It may be thinking it's seeing another elephant, by the way.
No,
actually, they have a test to distinguish that. They'll put something weird on the animal's forehead and see if it tries to get it off. Now, this is a little bit biased against animals that have short appendages, but nevertheless, this is one of the ways they know they try to distinguish between an animal thinking it's seen another animal and an animal thinking that it's seen itself. But that takes both a recognition of the animal, a sense of self-awareness, and it takes a certain level of motor skills. So the danger of this test is that people have used it to argue that not only are the unborn not persons, but neither are born children up to 9 months, up to 2 years,
Right.
because it often takes little babies a while to reliably pass this test. I recently, unrelated to this, tried this on my 3-month-old son.
No.
To see if he was a
sure.
person.
Don't do science on your baby, Joe.
This is the problem. Being married to a therapist, we hear of all sorts of crazy things researchers have done to kids. And it's like the neutral face experiment, if anyone's ever heard of that, where you do a neutral expression.
And you just
kids
upset the
freak out.
child.
Oh, yeah, totally.
Yeah,
We haven't
it's
done
mean.
that one yet.
Can we bring Mrs. Heschmeyer out here to Southern California and do this test on some of the staff here at Catholic Answers?
Oh, yes, I think we should just start. Hopefully, they're not listening to the show. We'll be able to ambush them better.
I do feel like Chris has led us to where we might fruitfully conclude this argument, and that is that we really don't want to be mean to elephants, but I feel like many Christians are resentful of the animal rights movement, and not just Christians, but many people who are pro-life people from all walks of life are resentful of the animal rights movement, not because they don't like animals, but because they like babies a lot, and they have a visceral reaction to that. This is hypocrisy, this love of animals, while you're killing babies in the womb. And I think we have to get over that emotion and let the animals have their due as well. There is something magnificent about God's creatures.
Yeah, I think when you have a double standard, try to resolve it in the right direction.
Oh yeah, thank you, Joe.
Like the problem isn't that we're treating elephants too well; it's that we're treating humans too poorly.
Yeah.
So if you see this contradiction, this tension, don't make the elephant's life worse. That's not going to fix it.
I have to say, though, I am also the same person who thinks, and I've argued with Trent Horn about this, like the whales at SeaWorld, they're fine. They're in a big, beautiful tank. They're happy whales. They get a lot of food. I love zoos. I love animal adventure parks. I think there are standards that you should have, but I think this modern, the cow is so upset because there's a fence around the field. The cow does not care about the fence around the field.
On the SeaWorld one with the killer whales,
I'll fight you on this. I will fight you.
Blackfish. Have you seen that documentary?
Yes.
I haven't seen it, but I understand.
It's the most pathetic. I'm sorry, but it's not even journalism.
Okay.
It's all about the feelings of the people who.
Sure.
It's a little tendentious.
It's not a little tendentious. There is no contrary point of view offered, which is a basic law of journalism. Zero. And I'm sorry,
I want to
but
point out how remarkable it is that we've kind of switched sides. Normally, as Chris says, Cy is like the resident hippie, and here he is saying we should be meaner to killer whales.
I don't want to be mean to killer whales. I'm just saying SeaWorld is not being mean to killer whales. They take beautiful care of these killer whales. I have gone and paid good money at resorts that don't have as nice a pool as these whales get. So I feel like maybe give the whale a cocktail every now and then, and we'll call it a day.
I do miss the circus where they got in the pool with the whale and, swam around with it, and
It's and if that,
but that's what it was. It was a circus.
yeah, but what? I'm not opposed to circuses either. But I guess I'm the resident grumpy conservative, and you two are the wild-eyed animal rights liberals today. All right, let's take a break, and we'll come. I got more news I want to get to though, but I hope everything goes well for the rest of the lifetime of Happy the Elephant. Right back after this.
There's only one Catholic Answers Live.
Do you love praying for people? Have you ever wanted to use your gift of prayer to share Jesus with others and build up the body of Christ? Start a public prayer station with St. Paul Street Evangelization. Listen to people's needs, pray with them, or invite them to meet you at church. St. Paul Street Evangelization can help you get started. Find out how at streetevangelization.com. That's streetevangelization.com.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Real Estate for Life. Real Estate for Life connects home buyers and sellers to real estate agents while supporting pro-life organizations. On the web at realestateforlife.org.
Imagine like Caravaggio was gonna do a painting of David Anders. You're sitting there getting ready to do this painting, and he takes his time, you're sitting there, you're like really excited about how it's gonna look, and then turns it around and it looks like Tom Price. Like, how would you feel about that?
That's a big improvement.
Wow.
Called to Communion with Dr. David Anders. Tonight, 11 Eastern, on EWTN Radio.
Welcome back. Catholic Answers Live. I'm Cy Kellett, your host. Our guests for this panel discussion program on this Friday afternoon are Chris Check, our president, and Joe Heschmeyer, the author of a lovely new book, a really fine new book, a needed addition to the Catholic Answers collection. It's called The Early Church Was the Catholic Church, the Catholic Witness of the Fathers in Christianity's first 2 centuries. Congratulations on the book, Joe.
Thank you very much.
I hope it sells like 1 million copies.
So do I.
That'd be great.
I know you. Chris definitely hopes it sells 1 million copies.
I'd be okay with it too. Yeah, that'd be nice.
Well, I wish people would take that much of an interest, because I think a lot of people live their understanding of history is, look, the early days of Christianity are like just shrouded in darkness and mystery. You know, we kind of know that there was this rural preacher, Jesus, but other than that, you know, until about the time of Constantine, we don't know anything. It could not be farther from the truth. We know a real solid, clear history of the Catholic faith.
I think another important point here, Cy, is that we owe, speaking of things to be thankful for, we owe a real debt of gratitude to the fathers and even many people whose names we do not know, who worked out all of these Christological and Trinitarian questions in the 3rd, 4th, and 5th centuries that when we say the creed, we just, totally take it for granted.
This is one of the most striking things about it. Like, this is one of the things about Protestantism that I have to admit I just don't understand psychologically and rationally, that if you don't think that the church is protected by the Holy Spirit and guided by the Holy Spirit and preserved from error by the Spirit,
right,
how in the world do you end up with trusting the 3 persons in one substance and Christ having a fully divine and fully human nature with a human will and a divine will? And, there are some really fine distinctions being made that are critical for making sense of the biblical evidence and not holding a heretical view of God or a heretical view of Christ and his humanity, and making nonsense of the cross. Like, you veer 1 degree off in either direction, and you find yourself in hot water theologically very, very quickly. So the idea that we just got all of this right by sheer human effort is like a shockingly Pelagian understanding of how theology works.
And I would have hoped that had I lived during this time, I would have had the good sense to just be quiet and listen to what the church was going to say when she worked it out. But, I read these heresies and I'm like, oh, I could have been a Monophysite.
I often feel that way.
I could have been an historian. I could have been an Arian.
Yeah.
All these make perfect sense to me.
Right. Yeah. Like, if these people had not lived and died for the truth and allowed themselves to be docile to the Holy Spirit for century after century, I don't understand. Like, Arianism seems perfectly reasonable in a way where you go, oh yeah, that makes sense. I don't know how I'm with you, Chris. We just stand in such a privileged position because of the humility and docility of, these saints.
And in fact, if I can underscore this, we sometimes will say, or you will hear people say, boy, if I had known Jesus or something like that, then I would have, lived a better life. Well, of course, we have him here, really, truly present in the Blessed Sacrament. There's your segue. But
thank you, Chris.
In any case, we tend to think we're at some kind of a disadvantage given the time that we live in, theologically speaking. But all these things have been worked out for us.
Right. What's the thing that you say, Joe? You always say about what the apostles had, and then what the apostles lacked, and then what we have and what we lack. Do you have a little saying about that? Do you know the saying I'm talking about?
I may or may not know the saying. I know that Augustine talks about how the apostles saw Jesus and had to take the church on faith. They have this band of like a dozen people, and they have to trust it's going to become the largest religion in the world. I think he says this in his tractates on John. I don't remember exactly. But we see the church and have to take Christ on faith.
Right.
So we have to trust that the church is telling the truth where it came from. Now, historically, all the evidence points to that, but there still is an act of faith. You know, someone could say, yeah, I choose to believe everyone in the first century is making this up. And that's really implausible, but you couldn't, demonstrate, well, as with any historical proposition, you can't prove that George Washington wasn't an elaborate hoax the founding fathers played on us to, they pretended there was this guy. Yeah. So we still have to take Christ, even in his existence, on faith in one sense. And they had to take the church on faith in terms of it becoming the thing that he promised, that the mustard seed would become the mustard tree.
Right. But it's but that formulation of Augustine that I got from you, it does put into perspective that they didn't face any less difficulty with us because of their being at the beginning. We have so many advantages that they didn't have.
Sure.
Oh yeah, like 99.8% of the people around them probably thought they were crazy. And so they had seen something miraculous, but you still have to trust that you're not just delusional because, you and your friends have seen the risen Christ.
Right. Yeah.
It would be very easy to fall into everyone around me really goes this other direction.
Yeah.
And then much more so, the people who lived at that time didn't know Jesus personally, but just have to trust this small group of people who are just dead set that they definitely knew him, definitely saw him rise from the dead.
Chris gave me the segue with his invocation of the Eucharist because the U.S. bishops just met to talk about the Eucharist. Did either of you? So I'm moving on to another news story. That's what I'm doing right now.
I see what you're doing.
Either of you have any impressions that you are left with from that meeting and the bishops here in the U.S. and its product?
I do. I'm worried mine might be cynical, so I'll let Chris go first.
Oh, you think he's going to be less cynical than you?
So this is the difficulty. The document of itself is a perfectly fine and useful document in reiterating the theology of the Eucharist. It came out of a need to give an answer, a clear answer to the faithful about worthiness, a phrase that it seems to me sort of came into more public use as a consequence of this Eucharistic coherence, and it doesn't address it. It addresses it in theory. It quotes the relevant canons 915 and 916 about manifest, persistent, manifest, grave evil. But what people were asking was, what about a politician who is specifically encouraging, facilitating, promoting the murder of the unborn through legislation? And it does not address that question, and as a consequence, it seems to me that nothing will change. Nothing will change in this regard.
Right. To put it into very concrete terms, like when I was a kid, the question was about Ted Kennedy. Well, what about Ted Kennedy? Is there any? Now the question is Joe Biden and Nancy Pelosi. So you just take the most prominent Catholic politicians, and we're here in California, Gavin Newsom, and you ask this question, but it's not a
Mayor Lori Lightfoot if you're in Chicago, even though she's not Catholic.
Well, no, here's the thing. So, yes, there are moral principles that Catholics need to follow, and that's great, but simply stating the principle is insufficient. If there are not sanctions, then the principles quickly lose their, if not their meaning, their practical application.
Well, at the risk of being kind of consequentialist, what will be the consequence of the actions, however? Like, it seems to me, and this is reading the tea leaves, I do know Archbishop Cordileone personally, but not in any intimate way. But it seems to me, as an outsider, looking up there to what they're doing in the Archdiocese, Cordileone seems to be moving step by step in some kind of process in which he is confronting Nancy Pelosi on her counter witness to the gospel. Praying for her, fasting for her, doing these things. So let's say I have no idea what the next steps in that, or if even there are next steps. I'm not trying to, say that I have an insight. It just looks from the outside. Okay, so say he confronts Nancy Pelosi and publicly says, look, we've done all these things, X, 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 and Speaker Pelosi has continues in her manifest, grave, public sin. She can't receive communion. What is the good that will come from
Two
that?
things will come of it that will be good. And I think he has, on this show, in fact, Cy, correct me if I'm wrong, said, yes, there is a process. So two things good will come of it. One, he will have done a great act of mercy to Nancy Pelosi that, please God, before she dies, shakes her conscience and brings her to repentance. Two, he will have clarified things for the faithful of his archdiocese and more broadly the way the media works today. So two good things, at least, will come of that.
And Joe, do you have an answer to my question?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. I think getting back to your very first question about the thoughts about the document, my thinking is anyone confused about Eucharistic coherence and all of that is probably not going to read a 31-page USCCB dossier on the Eucharist.
Really? You don't think so?
So, well, I mean, in all seriousness, it's this question of like, who is actually the audience for this text? And it feels like the product of a bureau. Like, it's fine. The document is fine in what it says, and that it doesn't say anything heretical. But I would be genuinely shocked if anyone's view of the Eucharist changes in a very meaningful sense on the particular issue of worthiness to receive.
Yeah.
On the basis of reading that. It just doesn't seem like it's likely to happen.
In that way, it might be reminiscent of the 1990s documents on child abuse in the church, child sexual abuse in the church. Great, fantastic documents. Did absolutely nothing to advance the cause of protecting children.
Well, I almost worry it's more like the Atlantic fishing documents the USCCB puts out, where you're just like, someone spent a lot of time writing the document no one is going to read.
Right.
I didn't even know they were doing. Honestly, I didn't even know they were doing fishing.
That may be an exaggeration, but there's this like the USCCB has this tendency to put out documents on every issue.
Well, that was my argument when I was covering the Catholic Church here in California. The Catholic bishops, I think back in the early 2000s, a document on kindergarten and what should be provided in public school kindergarten and who it should be provided to. That is such, to me as a bishop, I would say, no, we can't say anything about this because all this does is dilute anything we ever say about anything else. We don't know any more about kindergarten than anybody else. Let's not. But they never say let's not. We're the wordiest church in the world.
I have a few questions that if I were given 10 minutes with the USCCB, and this will never happen, but maybe one of them is listening right now. But I have a few questions. One is, there was a time, actually there have been multiple examples in the history of the church where churchmen, bishops and popes, for example, I think of Gregory VII, right, and the Holy Roman Emperor, and the trip to Canossa, for example.
Yeah, Frederick.
But even more modern examples, the Feast of Christ the King, which we just celebrated, instituted by Pius XI as a consequence of the secular government's abuse of the church in Spain, Mexico, and Russia, where there have been clear examples of prelates standing up to the secular authorities whose behavior is gravely immoral. And where is that? What is going to be necessary for a kind of a recapturing of that spirit? That'd be one question. I've got more.
Okay, well, we can do those when we come back. I want to say again that we'll do our audio from National Public Radio, our Wild and Wacky audio, which I have to say, not very hard to find. I listened for one day, came up with something good. So we'll play that audio. We'll get your reaction to that, and we'll continue with the news of the day from a Catholic perspective. I'll leave it in your hands, Joe and Chris, when we come back. If you want to continue, it does seem like we've made some relatively dismissive points about the bishop's document on the Eucharist. But if there's more you want to dig into, we can do that. If not, I'll play you the audio, and we got a whole bunch more stories from around the world, from the news of the church, from the news of the secular world, to take a look at from a Catholic perspective with our president, Chris Check, and with apologist Joe Heschmeyer. I'm Cy Kellett, your host, right back with more after this on Catholic Answers Live. Welcome back. Catholic Answers Live, Black Friday edition. Here in the United States, it's called Black Friday because at least the myth is that today is the day that businesses go from being in the red, that is not being profitable, to being in the black. And then everything for the rest of the year is profitable for them. I think that's a myth. I don't know. But that's why we call it Black Friday here in the U.S. Because I think I'm not good with math and statistics, but I think 97% of our spending happens in December. I think we spend 97% of our income in the month of December. I could be slightly off, but not by much.
Might be ever so slightly.
You think there's a small discrepancy between that and reality?
Can I share with you my feelings about evidence of our disordered age? It's the amount of money people spend on Halloween decorations.
Really? Oh, hard disagree.
What?
Hard disagree.
That's a hard disagree. Why?
The people up and down my street decorate for Halloween as if it were Christmas, only the colors of the lights are orange and black and big inflatable.
And now they throw purple in. I don't know how purple became a Halloween color.
Yeah, big inflatable. It's crazy.
But wait a second. You are the great advocate of basic sociability. Let's do things where we care for one another as neighbors and we beautify our surroundings and we get together socially. Like
this is not an argument for excess. I think if everybody wants to get together and have a beer or some red wine and carve a pumpkin and hand out candy, that's great. And dress up as a ghoul. All those things are good to do.
Yeah.
But the crazy excess of front yard decorations for Halloween.
Yeah, I put up exactly nothing for Halloween this year. So
you didn't carve a pumpkin?
I had nothing. I'm totally ashamed of that. I think we had some pumpkins that ended up on the front porch in kind of a jumble.
I love.
That's all we did.
I love carving pumpkins.
Joe, why are you a hard disagree on Halloween? By the way, I have no idea. As so often happens, I have no idea why we're talking about this or how this happened. But what's your view on
Chris
how?
views it as a sign of Western decadence, which in a way it is actually.
Yeah.
So I'll tell you, I was briefly embroiled in a minor international scandal. That's kind of an exaggeration.
Is that on your resume, Joe? Briefly embroiled.
I posted a picture with my wife and my two kids, and I'm wearing a wolf mask, and they're all wearing pig costumes or a pig, light costume.
That's funny. The wolf and the three little pigs.
Yeah, thank you. You understood it. Rich Bell, who is a Mexican Catholic apologist, I think Mexican, shared it in Spanish and said, Halloween greetings from Joe Heschmeyer and his family. And people lost their minds because I was dressed as a wolf and they thought it was demonic. And didn't get the Halloween fairy tale thing going on there. Like my daughter,
I thought they were going to be offended that you dressed your wife and children as pigs. I didn't think that the wolf was going to be the problem in that one.
Totally valid. I'll let you know, the person who chose this costume was my now 2-year-old. She asked about the Big Bad Wolf and the Three Little Pigs every day for 3 weeks leading up to Halloween, and continues to do so daily. She doesn't get that we don't just wear costumes all the time because why not?
Well, is the wolf a particularly demonic creature in Mexico? Or are they like?
I don't know. So it's all across Latin America. It's people Facebook people commenting in Spanish, so I can't even follow the debate very easily. Can't really jump in to defend myself, and they're just like,
no entiendo.
Praising Satan. And I'm just like, no, it was like a little kid's thing, and it actually my takeaway from it was, so often when we see religious processions or something in Spain or in Latin America or in the Philippines, and people are like, oh, look they're obviously committing idolatry. We're probably doing the same thing on the other way around of just not getting the cultural context in which a thing makes sense.
Yeah, it's funny to me. By the way, I have no objection to your Halloween costumes. I think people should dress up as scary things at Halloween. That makes perfect sense to me. And it's funny to me that you would have had pushback from south of the Rio Grande on this question, because there they have a very sort of macabre sense of the supernatural. Yeah.
I think it's because of that there's been some pushback from some Catholics who think that it's a little too excessive.
Sure. Well, some of it is quite strange.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
All right. Well, we were talking before we started this very fruitful conversation about Halloween lights and wolf costumes. We were talking about Eucharistic coherence and the U.S. Catholic
Actually, sorry,
Bishop.
can I correct one thing? I just checked. Rich Bell's actually from Venezuela. I've mistakenly misremembered him as being
That
from
is such an American thing to do.
I
South of the
know.
border
All the
must be
same,
Mexico.
yeah.
Let me
Oh
just
my
say,
gosh, you bigot.
His pinned post is about receiving donations or gifts in Mexico. So.
Oh, he mentioned Mexico once, so you're off the hook, Joe. Right. That's it. So you're Italian, right? Because you mentioned Italy earlier in the show.
Exactly.
Eschmeier.
Well,
All right.
I just wanted to correct it before I got myself in another controversy.
Yes, Joe doesn't know the difference between Venezuela and Mexico. All right. But okay, so the U.S. Catholic bishops made a statement on the Eucharist. It was much anticipated. It seems to me that it was something of a anticlimax. What was the word you were going to use?
Nothing burger?
A nothing
That's
burger.
the cool- yeah.
Nothing burger seems
Cool
a
kids.
little bit less respectful than anticlimax. But all right, if you want to
Fair.
talk about the bishops that way, Joe.
But more descriptive.
Yeah, right. So, but you had a couple more points you guys wanted to make.
I just wanted to say that that prior to this and subsequent to this, there's a tremendous amount of discussion of conscience, and we've heard a lot of that here locally. But have people following their conscience and Nancy Pelosi saying she's following her conscience and this sort of thing. But I have a question for the USCCB. This would be another one. What about the consciences of priests? And this is something that bishops should be looking after. So a priest now, and there have been examples of this around the country, but a priest now, in the wake of this document, does he feel more fortified to deny communion to someone in public manifest grave sin than he did before? And then also not just the priest, but what about extraordinary ministers of the Eucharist? And there may be some listening devout ones who
there are many who struggle. Yes.
Yeah, who themselves now are thinking, I would not like to give communion. My conscience is telling me not to do this.
Right.
Are they getting coverage by this document? I don't think that they are. I mean, the bishops will say, have said the question, particularly with respect to legislative and political life. Priests and now extraordinary ministers of the Eucharist are left hanging by this.
I think that's a really good point. This is regularly a misunderstood aspect of the whole question of reception of Holy Communion and Eucharistic coherence and all of that. And we can see the distinction in canon law. Canon 916 is the personal conscience one. Right. It says if your conscience of grave sin, you're not to celebrate Mass or receive the body of the Lord without previous sacramental confession, unless there's a grave reason and no opportunity to confess. That's the you judge yourself one.
Right.
But Canon 915, right before that, says those who have been excommunicated or interdicted after the imposition or declaration of the penalty, and others obstinately persevering in manifest grave sin, are not to be admitted to Holy Communion. Now, that is very explicitly not on the part of the person who is trying to approach unworthily. That is on the part of the minister of Holy Communion,
right? But
whether that's the ordinary or the extraordinary minister.
But it's very passive construction, so it doesn't say who's to deny them.
It's true.
So, and I don't.
But it does say they're not to be admitted. So if you are administering communion to someone you know to be persevering in manifest grave sin, obstinately, and that's a really tricky thing to know when in that criteria.
Yeah, you better be very careful about that judgment because.
It's pretty clear whose burden or whose responsibility this is. Here in East County, it doesn't fall to the Santee Sheriff Department.
Well, just a practical consideration. What if bishops were to forget for the moment, as a practical matter, the second canon there, and simply stress repeatedly the first and publicly, so that. I would feel it's an advance from the situation we have now if, for example, the Archbishop of Washington, D.C. were to say, not that I'm forbidding Joe Biden from receiving communion, but said Joe Biden should not present himself for communion, and then left it on Joe Biden. This would clarify mightily for the innocent person in the pew who is confused by this scandalous behavior of supporting abortion so publicly and persistently, and also maintaining that one is a good Catholic. That is scandalous. But it would also be a step that's not quite as injurious to the church, which is very fragile at the moment. So what about my proposals? Just say, with names attached to it, like the Archbishop just say, Nancy Pelosi should not present, so long as she does X or persists in X, she should not present herself for communion.
Yeah, but she's going to continue to do it, so that's why 9:15 comes up.
I believe Nancy Pelosi stays back if only the priest is administering communion. What I've been told from priests in D.C. is that she'll go to extraordinary ministries and she won't go to priests. I don't actually know if that's true, but that there seems to be a sense in which she wants to avoid the being denied communion moment. And so will avoid someone likely to deny her.
Interestingly, along these lines, when the Holy Father was in Buenos Aires and celebrating public masses where public officials would be present, he did not, and I think probably continues this practice, did not give communion to the faithful.
Because he didn't want that photograph.
He didn't want the photograph, yeah.
But
so he has a knowledge of the problem.
Well, here's the let me phrase it the way Father Hugh phrased it for us the other day. And so say I dress up in full Nazi regalia and I go to Mass. And then I present myself for communion dressed in full Nazi regalia, including SS death heads. Should the priest give me communion?
No, it would be sacrilegious.
It'd be scandalous.
But so I am symbolically associating myself. I'm not actually killing anybody. I'm symbolically associating myself with the Nazis, and I should be denied communion. I agree with your answer. So, but the association that certain politicians make, some of which we've just named, is not symbolic at all. They are participating in
the murder of the
industry
unborn.
of death.
Right. I think there's maybe two things to add here. One, the situation is in some ways worse than we've even described. I was talking to a priest who celebrated Mass for the Bidens, not in D.C. I won't go into any details as to where, but the ordinary of where he was told him he was not allowed to deny communion to the Bidens when they presented themselves.
Yes,
and so he actually couldn't fleece the altar in that sense. Like, it wasn't just that he didn't get encouraged; he was actively ordered not to.
A priest isn't bound to obedience in that regard, though, Joe.
I agree, because that's
not?
the other half of what I was going to say.
No,
1 Corinthians 11. This is all rooted in divine law, not canon law.
Yeah,
but St. Paul says that whoever eats or drinks the cup of the Lord in an unworthy manner will be guilty of profaning the body and blood of the Lord. As a priest, you do not have to cooperate in profaning the body and blood of the Lord.
Right.
That's just like 101.
Yep.
And then the next verse, he says, let a man examine himself, and so eat of the bread and drink of the cup. That's the root of 9:16, that you should judge yourself. But then he says, anyone who eats and drinks without discerning the body eats and drinks judgment upon himself. Now, as a priest, if you love your flock, you should help them not damn themselves.
Yes.
And so if you love Joe Biden, if you love Nancy Pelosi, if you love even the lesser known people cooperating with any of these kind of systems of evil, you should help them not hurt themselves. We don't do assisted suicide in the church, and that's true spiritually as well.
Let me give you an analogy, and I want you to ponder
That's
this.
really well said, Joe.
Analogy through the break.
Thanks.
It's well said, but it raises concerns, and I wonder. To me, it does raise some concerns, and I realize I'm going back to my position as the hippie liberal on the panel, but I want to present you with the analogy, and then you respond to it when we come back, and then we'll get on to some NPR audio. But okay, there's a murderer fleeing through a mall where there are troops of Girl Scouts. And by right, to stop the murderer, a police officer can fire his gun and kill the murderer. But for the good of the Girl Scouts, he doesn't, because nobody's that good an aim that you're sure you're going to not hit a Girl Scout. So what about the bishop who says, I have the right and even the duty, as the police officer has the duty to stop the murderer? to confront these politicians, but for the good of the other faithful who are so deeply confused and conflicted, I'm not going to fire that bullet. I want you to ponder that analogy for 90 seconds and come back and respond to it. We'll be right back with more with Joe Heschmeyer and Chris Check as we discuss as we have our panel discussion of the news of the world from a Catholic perspective right after this.
This is Bishop Chad Zielinski from the Diocese of Fairbanks of Northern Alaska, and you are listening to Catholic Answers Live.
Homeschool Connections, an online provider of courses for your Catholic homeschool, is a sponsor of Catholic Answers Live. Homeschool Connections website is homeschoolconnections.com.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Real Estate for Life. Real Estate for Life connects homebuyers and sellers to real estate agents while supporting pro-life organizations. On the web at realestateforlife.org.
EWTN is seeking a dynamic producer to join the EWTN radio team in Irondale, Alabama. The right candidate will be a passionate, multi-skilled, talented professional who can manage and direct all aspects of producing world-class programming and play a part in Mother Angelica's mission of evangelization. If this is you or someone you may know, email a resume and cover letter, including salary requirements, to humanresources@ewtn.com.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. I'm Cy Kellett, your host, infuriating the world with his analogies. So now that everybody's mad at me about my analogy, I wonder if you would respond to it. And I'll just very briefly say it's an analogy about a police officer might not shoot in an instance where, even where he has a duty to stop a fleeing murderer because he wants to protect the innocent who are near or in the line of fire. Might that analogy apply to a bishop who does not openly confront the pro-choice politician because that will there might be other people, innocent Catholic people, in the line of fire?
Yeah, so the whole line of fire for thing is not making sense to me at all, Cy. You've done some incredible gymnastics here to defend the USCCB. Who gets hurt in the line of fire if Archbishop Cordileone excommunicates Nancy Pelosi?
Well, maybe the Catholic who is very poorly catechized, barely hanging on to their attachment to the church, and will see this as legalistic.
What about the superabundance of Catholics who continue to be scandalized?
Well, but you asked me who gets hurt, and that's who gets hurt. I mean,
I think
this sounds like a reason to do nothing. And in any moral equation. Go ahead.
Okay.
I think there's a huge failure of catechesis, and the bishops rightly recognize it, although they seem a little circumspect about whose fault that is. And so as a result, like there are
because they're the chief catechists of the church.
So there are people who are very poorly formed, and I have no doubt will receive this simply as a political move. I honestly wish that we would have this controversy over a Catholic public figure who's not a politician to avoid the most obvious trap in the world.
Oh, yeah.
So if instead of Nancy Pelosi, talk about Bill Gates.
Is he Catholic?
Talk about, allegedly.
I didn't know that. I
believe either he or at least Melinda is. But they're pro-choice and pro-population control. And so they'd be great candidates to have the conversation about where they're in public life, but they're
not politicians.
Yeah, exactly. Although now with all the vaccine stuff, they're kind of political. But before that would have been great. In other words, focus on something like that if you want to use it as an educational point. But to maybe fix your analogy, Cy, Jesus in the parable of the wheat and the weeds in Matthew 13 talks about weeds in the garden. And the servants pretty reasonably say, well, do you want us to go and gather them? And in verse 29, he says, no, lest in gathering the weeds, you root up the wheat along with them. Now, that doesn't mean do literally nothing to protect the flock, but it does mean we want to watch out for a certain overzealousness of if I can't read everyone's soul. And so you should certainly err on the side of admitting someone to communion if you don't know.
Yeah.
I think the other thing we're saying here is, honestly, the most fruitful conversations here are not going to be the ones had in the public square very publicly or even at the communion route.
I'm sorry.
They're going to be the ones happening privately.
Before you make your point,
okay.
once again, Jesus has a better analogy than me. This is a theme. He always has a better analogy than me.
Well, I wish our Lord were here so I could get some clarification from him, because I would have said, I'm sorry, Jesus, didn't you just not so long ago talk about the plants growing up among the thorns and getting choked out? Now, and we do weed gardens. It's a good thing to do. It's a good thing to weed a garden for the sake of your broccoli or your red peppers or whatever it is that you have in there, right? So I need some more clarification on this passage in Matthew.
I suspect we could get more clarification by comparing it to some of the extremes we've seen in the history of Protestantism, where there were attempts by the Puritans to create a pure church that only had the saved in it.
Right.
And they're totally disastrous. And of course, you can very quickly get into this position where you're judging the souls of people left and right. And that's just not a healthy spiritual place for any human being to occupy who is themselves in need of redemption. So I think that we can recognize, and this is actually, so to tie this back to Canon 915, the person who is persevering in objective grave sin, we're not actually judging them as a sinner. We're not judging them as going to hell. We're just saying that the way that they're living is contrary to what Catholicism teaches and believes. And so to take, also, who can't come up for communion? Like a devout Methodist. We're not saying the Methodist is going to hell. We just mean that the life they live and the beliefs that they profess are not consistent with what we believe as Catholics. They may well be ahead of many of us in terms of going to heaven, but in terms of like the declaration that they are in communion with the church in the full sense, they're just not.
Yeah.
And so it's a way of respecting the truth as well as the dignity of the person to say that. So the problem is we have to find a way of presenting that without it making it sound like we're saying for sure this person is going to hell because of this or that political position.
Can I have a last point here?
Of course. Yeah.
I know that in all of these circumstances surrounding the episcopacy, the laity who are frustrated and they think, well, what is it? What can I even do about this? And it's a great question. But this, in fact, is something that you can do, especially if you're a father of children. If you're not in the state of grace, don't go to communion. You are doing a good thing there, and you're setting a wonderful example for your children, that it's okay to sit there in the pew while everybody else is going up. And I would recommend that to, I mean, obviously the church recommends that too, but think of it in those terms. What a great example you're setting for your children by not going to communion. You don't have to give the details of your transgressions to your children, but just say, you know what? I have to square things up with our Lord before I go back in confession.
Amen.
We need so much of that catechesis at every level of the church of genuine reverence for the Eucharist. It sounds to me, if I could kind of encapsulate what the two of you are saying, because it does seem to me that the two of you agree, and that is that we already have church law on this matter. We have canons that clearly tell what should be happening.
Well, not just that. We have a 2006 USCCB statement that is saying exactly what people were hoping this son would say. Happy are those who are called to his supper. Literally, the subtitle is On Preparing to Receive Christ Worthily in the Eucharist.
Right.
The problem isn't that they haven't said it. The problem is like nobody reads it. And so they can continue to say beautiful, beautiful things.
Well,
but if no one's reading it.
It seemed to me that the two of you were saying something beyond just that nobody reads it. It's that bishops don't enforce it.
These moral principles and these moral teachings and precepts quickly lose their meaning if there are not some sanctions behind them.
Yes.
They lose their meaning. They lose their meaning in a practical sense. I'll put it that way.
Okay, fair enough. So then we'll leave that as the kind of summary response then, because it does seem to me that there was a general agreement on that the document's fine. There's nothing wrong with it. The words are all nice and everything's capitalized where it should be. But this is not what the church needs. What the church needs is to take, in practical day-to-day situations, take proper care that the Eucharist is, that Christ in the Eucharist is treated with all of the awe, love, and respect that we can muster.
Amen.
Yeah, Joe?
Yeah, I had a very controversial analogy that I was holding back a little bit there.
You gave us Jesus's analogy. That I think was
well, the controversial analogy I was going to give was the whole Black Lives Matter, All Lives Matter thing.
Yeah.
Both of those statements are true, but the one you choose to say in the context in which you choose to say it gives an impression that maybe isn't within the scope of what you're trying to do. But
Right.
if you're blind to how people are going to read into that. So I'd say the USTCB's document is fine in terms of what it says, but in the context,
It's not fine.
People take a message. Yeah, people get. We kind of all lives matter. This kind of sentence.
All right, coming up after the break, a Catholic Answers Friday panel show tradition. We're going to listen to some audio from the news reports of National Public Radio and get a Catholic reaction right after this.
Have you enrolled in the Catholic Answers School of Apologetics? Let me ask you a more important question. Do you believe as a Catholic that you have an obligation to share the Catholic faith? In fact, the Church has answered this question, and the answer is that all confirmed Catholics are obliged to share the faith. It's actually in canon law. Catholic Answers is here to help you fulfill that obligation. Our School of Apologetics courses will equip you to help all the people you come in contact with understand what the Church teaches and why. A great place to start is with all the Catholics in your life. Learn the art of apologetics from the best of the best and start sharing the gospel today. Visit schoolofapologetics.com. That's schoolofapologetics.com.
Did you know you can access Catholic Answers Live right from your phone or other mobile device? Download the Catholic Answers Live app today. It's free, and you'll have instant access to our daily broadcast, the schedule of upcoming shows, and you'll even be able to search the archive and listen to thousands of past shows. The Catholic Answers Live app, available now on iOS and Android.
Most of us Catholic parents agree our number one goal in life is to pass on the faith to our children. But here's the bad news. Today's world has a million ways to steal your kid's soul. Don't be afraid, says Father Sebastian Walsh. God loves your children even more than you do, and he desires their salvation more than anything. In his groundbreaking new book, Always a Catholic, Father Walsh shows you how to cooperate with God to bring about the fulfillment of his will for your kids. Always a Catholic reminds us that keeping our kids in the faith is about the way we live our Catholicism in our own lives and as a family from day to day. Order your copy of Always a Catholic by visiting shop.catholic.com today or ask for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you. Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live panel show, where we talk about whatever's happening from a Catholic perspective with Chris Check, our president, with Joe Heschmeyer, apologist and writer and speaker, who has a beautiful new book, which you should give somebody for Christmas. The Early Church Was the Catholic Church. Oh, you know who you should give it to? Give it to a Mormon for Christmas. Does that mean?
Yeah, or a Calvinist. Or Lutheran.
Or one of your
Catholic
children.
who wants to know more about their faith.
Yeah. All right. Joe's going for the low-hanging fruit. All right.
So as many copies as I can get,
This is the specialist time of a special time of the year. It's a special time of the year because it's Black Friday. It's a Friday panel show. But the specialist moment of all is when we get to listen to the reporting from National Public Radio. For those listening around the world, National Public Radio is publicly funded and also funded by donations here in the United States. And it exists for the purpose of explaining and defending every single secular humanist proclivity and presenting that as if it were unbiased
gospel truth.
Is that fair? Did I assess that properly, Joe?
Yeah, I say this as someone who used to love NPR.
Oh, I still love NPR.
Yeah,
you can't. It's hard not to revel in the unctuousness sometimes.
Yeah, but the thing is that even the quality
it's gone down.
It's always been exceedingly left wing, but there was a kind of an honesty about it, and addiction, for example, all of that is gone now. Yeah, and they don't even have car talk anymore, which was the second greatest radio show of all time.
That's why people are listening to this instead.
That's right.
All right. Well, this comes from A. Martinez reporting on the Morning Edition program on National Public Radio. Here's how his report begins. And I would like you to listen to this as two things, as Catholics and also as Catholics who are connected to reality. So I would like see what I'm saying? So there's two levels. I would like to get your response both as a Catholic and as a person who still maintains perhaps gossamer, but some connection to reality. Here's the news from NPR.
In 10 states, trans student athletes have a choice: live authentically or play on their school sports teams. Tennessee is one of those states. Earlier this year, Governor Bill Lee signed a law banning trans athletes from competing on school teams that align with their gender.
I feel speechless hearing that.
I think he said it with a straight face.
One of the great debates of our time, it shouldn't be, but one of the great debates of our time is what constitutes a man and what constitutes a woman. What is male and female? And this NPR reporter acts as if that is not the debate. There is no debate about that. I find that astonishing. Like that in the news, even the news that is coming from secular leftists, to pretend as if there's no debate on this. There's all that's left is the remnants of some backward states like Tennessee.
Yeah, it is. It is shocking. It is shocking because it is. It's just preached as gospel truth that even a few years ago would have been an extremely controversial idea, even on the left. Like, it really is only after gay marriage is legalized that there's a concerted effort to redefine gender. And it does so in this hilariously ironic way that, that we were told for years and years and years that you couldn't change your sexual orientation. But now you can go from being a man to a woman, which, has the same effect.
Right.
That you can't go from a man who likes men to being a man who likes women, but you can go from a man who likes men to being a woman who likes men. So you can actually cure homosexuality, so to speak, through transgenderism. Like, the whole thing is just Alice in Wonderland topsy-turvy.
It is.
And topsy-turvy in this really kind of Orwellian sense. Like, in the United Kingdom, there was a controversy where a woman posted the dictionary definition of woman as adult human female, and it was banned. It was censored because it obviously doesn't go with trans ideology. So literally, she couldn't publicly post the dictionary definition. And so you have this redefinition of words like gender. And if you say, well, I can already imagine people listening saying, oh, you're conflating sex and gender. I'm not. They're the ones who are redefining gender, because gender comes from genera, like the generation. It's referring specifically to men and women having kids. Like, the words like generation come from the same root as gender. Like, gender is about male and female. Masculinity and femininity flow from that. Now, it's true. I mean, to give what's due in terms of like what this error gets right, it's true that some men are more masculine than others. Some women are more feminine than others. And that's nothing new, right? Like, we've had the word tomboy for literally centuries in English. So we always known this. The idea that, like, if you are a boy or a man who likes typically feminine things, you're actually a woman, is a rejection of science, and is actually really a regression in terms of our thinking about these things. Because there's only two people who are going to make a claim like that: someone who's incredibly sexist, or someone who buys into trans ideology. Like, they're both buying into this idea that if you're going to be really a man, you got to fit in this narrow box. And we've actually done a lot of, I think, largely good work in the last, say, century to say, no, not everyone neatly conforms to a gender stereotype.
Yeah.
That was all good movement.
Most of those gender stereotypes come from 19th century Victorian prudes anyways.
Right.
They have nothing to do with most of human history. So we're recovering from Victorians by becoming insane instead of just going back to being reason.
Well, unfortunately, I think we're actually re-entrenching the Victorian thing by saying, well, if you don't neatly fit into this stereotype, you must not be really a man.
Sure.
Is actually giving the stereotype a way more credence than it's due. Yeah. I mean, imagine if someone said, like, well, you're not really a Californian unless you smoke pot and live on the beach. half of Catholic Answers would no longer be California.
You think half?
Someone's going to write in.
It was a joke. All right, Chris.
This is why I'm very careful. This is why I was careful in the previous hour when I used the word rights, because it's such a like gender, is such a fluid word. Well, like authentically. I mean,
live authentically. What did you think of that?
Yeah. So, I would like to ask Mr. Martinez what that means. What does he mean by authentic there? I mean, I gather he means honestly.
It actually means something less than honestly. I think in a way that comports with your feelings.
Well, and this is why I'm very careful about the word rights, because if you go back to Rousseau and the social contract, he in effect says, if I have a desire for something, I have a right to it. And now other people, like Satan, for example, said that before him.
Yeah.
Right. But he is.
But Satan says it in such a grumpy way.
Sure,
it's the attractive English way that he says it.
Yeah. So Rousseau, he is. I'm the more I think about it, he is the dominant philosopher of.
Yeah. I'm sorry, I said English.
Where we are now.
I meant French.
I
apologize.
Yeah.
Okay. So I was.
And I don't know how to quarrel with. It's as our friend Carlo is always trying to do. If we can't agree on a set of first principles, so I don't think he and I, Mr. Martinez and I, have a similar understanding of what authentic means.
No,
I would say true to its nature. What does authentic mean, Joe?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I would think the same thing.
True to its nature.
This is the question of, well, what is your nature? So I think in this sense, I actually think we have way more in common with a committed trans activist than we realize, in that both of us are saying we need to figure out who we are so we know how to live authentically. That I think we're totally on board with. It's that they've taken this incredible intellectual shortcut to get to who they are authentically, and then are just going in this, very much Rousseauian kind of way. I think we can say, yes, we both agree we need to know your nature so we can know how you ought to live. I think we should really key in on that point and try to build from that little bit of common ground, because I think that really is where the two roads diverge.
And so
the other thing I'd say is,
go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say.
I was going to say. Okay.
Do you guys need a moderator?
The first question then I would have subsequent to the point that you just make there, Joe, is for Mr. Martinez is, okay, well, I'm in agreement with you. I want to live authentically according to my nature. Is my nature something that's immutable? And I guess he would answer, no, it's not. And then what is a nature if it's not immutable?
Yeah, is it a given? And I mean given in the sense of there is a giver of it, not just a given as a fact, but that. And I do think at root, the revolt against reality, as our good friend Gary Michuta says in a really good book too. But I want to recommend that book. It's really good. Revolt Against Reality. This idea that. Joe, sorry, were you going to say something? Because I just lost my train of thought. I started thinking about how much I like Gary Michuta, and then I lost my train of thought.
That happens to me a lot with Gary Michuta.
Yeah, he's just such a fine thinker.
I think there's a few questions you can kind of probe. The question was, how do you even have a conversation with someone with as different of an idea of reality? And so I don't have any easy solution to that, but I have a few places. One is, I think we need to lead with compassion. Yes. And I think that's, if you just treat it like a political issue, there are people really struggling from gender dysphoria, people who really do not feel at home in their body. And that's an incredibly painful thing. Two, I think it's worth, as weird as this is, talking about the soul body problem. That if you're an atheist materialist and you think that all you are is atoms, and your atoms either have an XY or an XX chromosomal characteristic, you can't believe in transgenderism. I mean, just logically, it doesn't make any sense. So someone who believes in transgenderism is introducing some kind of spiritual woo-woo of some kind. Bruce Jenner, who calls himself Caitlyn, he had a quote where he said, "My brain is much more female than it is male. It's hard for people to understand that, but that's what my soul is." So to understand how he can both be genetically a man and consider himself a woman, he has to introduce a concept of the soul.
Right.
So that's one place to go with it. Is like try to, if you want to talk holomorphic dualism, you can. 2, there's kind of a gender reductionism, and say like, why do you believe that you're the opposite sex? Well, I feel like a woman. Then the 2 categories of like conversation are then number 1, like what is a woman?
Yep.
And number 2, like what are the things that make you feel like a woman? Those are both, I think, potentially fruitful conversations, because what is a woman is a question that actually has a pretty straightforward answer. To say a woman is anyone who feels like a woman is this incredibly circular thing. And if it doesn't mean anything more than that, if I just said, I really feel like a left-handed person. Yeah. I'm not actually left-handed, but I feel like one. You would rightly say, I have no idea what that means, because left-handedness seems to be a biological reality. You either live or you don't.
Right.
What do you mean by I feel like a left-handed person? And so that would be a potentially kind of fruitful avenue to go. All of which is to say, if you strip man and woman of any meaning other than whoever wants to be in group A can be in group A and group B can be in group B, then man and woman no longer mean anything biological or otherwise.
And that, to me, is very dangerous for women, because one of the great advances in culture is that women have spaces that are reserved to them. Women are accorded certain kinds of accommodations, in the sense that, a women's bathroom is a women's bathroom. It's dangerous for men to be in there.
Yeah, it's a reverence that we accord.
A woman's sports team is a woman's sports team. It's dangerous for the women who want to play that sport to have to compete against men. And so, and this is all rooted in biological facts, not in anything having to do with the quality of the athletics or anything like that. But I did remember when you were talking, the Gary Michuta thing I wanted to say is, ultimately all this rejection of reality comes down to, I don't want anything to do with God. It does come down. And so what you said about we have to talk about souls, I think also we have to talk about God, because the rejection of God is it's worth talking about and worth revisiting. But I do want to go to the break. We have to take this very quick break. We'll come back. I have more audio I want to play for you. I made an editorial decision not to include any audio of the teenage girl who is presented in this as a boy, because I actually think that's extremely manipulative. I think that's actually journalistic abuse, to treat a teenager this way and add to that teenager's troubles because you thought it would make a good news report. So there will be no audio of the child or the minor in this. I think there might accidentally be some, or just tangentially be some audio of the mother. But more audio to play when we come back, but we have to take this break. Right back with more of our panel show.
Hello, this is Archbishop Alexander Sample of the Archdiocese of Portland in Oregon. Keep that dial right here on Catholic Answers Live.
St. John Paul II stated that, for the disciple of Christ, evangelization is a duty, an obligation of love, and the Catechism of the Catholic Church states that evangelization is necessary for salvation.
So we know we're called, but how do we do it?
St. Paul Street Evangelization can help. To learn more, contact us at streetevangelization.com. That's streetevangelization.com.
The most original and exclusive Catholic content is on EWTN Radio.
I'm quite sure I've heard over 1,000 conversion stories. And when you hear this, you have this opportunity of asking the question, Lord, what was it that opened this person's heart to you? What did you use?
The Journey Home with Marcus Grodi, Monday night, 8 Eastern, on EWTN Radio and television.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live on this Black Friday. We have all kinds of huge, enormous Black Friday deals over at shop.catholic.com. I want to direct you there because these deals go away at midnight tonight, Hawaii time. Head over. If it's not midnight Hawaii time yet, then you can still make it. Get a bunch of just special, just for today deals over at shop.catholic.com.
One of them is on the School of Apologetics. I think all the courses are at their cheapest for the Black Friday deals.
Nice, including Joe's on world religions, right, Joe?
Yeah.
including mine on the Inquisition. And can I tell you something? I got a note from a Spaniard who thanked me for it.
Nobody expects emails.
Nobody.
Well, because he said the Spanish keep getting kicked around for this thing, but he corrected something.
He did, and was
yes, because I referred to the Spanish Golden Age. I pronounced it in my class as the Siglo d'Oro, like Italian, Age of Gold, but it's Siglo de Oro, right? Yeah. So I was talking like an Italian.
En español.
Yes, but he said this is a minor quibble. He still gave it 5 stars.
Oh, 5 stars, even when you mispronounce your Spanish.
Yeah.
I have a funny story about Italian-Spanish mispronunciations. There was a priest. Well, it's actually not mispronunciations. They're very similar languages, but there's a few important divergences. One of which is that dona is a donut in parts of Spain and a woman in Italy. Yeah. So a priest went into a donut shop in Italy
and ordered a woman?
Asked for a hot donna. It was, nope, that's not what you're looking for.
Well,
maybe that was. You don't know, Joe.
Isn't that like when Kennedy made that speech and said, we're all Berliners now?
Yeah, we're all
donuts.
We're jelly-filled donuts.
All right, I want to play the audio again, and then we're going to get to some, we're going to play a quiz game with some NPR audio. But this is the introduction to a story that played this week on National Public Radio. And considering what we just said, I just want to see if you have any more comments about just this 15-second introduction, which probably departs from reality more than you would think a human being is capable of in 15 seconds.
In 10 states, trans student athletes have a choice: live authentically or play on their school sports teams. Tennessee is one of those states. Earlier this year, Governor Bill Lee signed a law banning trans athletes from competing on school teams that align with their gender.
I don't know what align with their gender, but I have to go back to just one thing. The person is not being denied the ability to play sports. They're being denied the opportunity to play sports with the opposite sex because
totally.
they're claiming that their gender.
With people who are
right,
genetically the same as you can. And let's just point out, this is actually an area where it makes a lot of sense. To segregate based on gender, in the real sense of it, that someone with XY chromosome and testosterone is in a different bodily category than someone who is primarily got estrogen and not testosterone. Like, they're major,
it's just
demonstrable. Different. Everyone knows it. Like a baby can tell the difference between men and women. And it makes difference in terms of sports. There's a reason the WNBA doesn't play with the NBA, because it's different body types. And so you can have female athletic excellence, but to demand that women play on the same team in the same sports as men, what you really are seeing is the destruction of what Title IX was trying to protect.
Right.
Yeah,
right. It's ultimately all of this inability to say a man is a man and a woman is a woman means destroying the gains that women have made.
Yeah, there's a major controversy right now, a turf war, if you will, between transgender activists and those that they call TERFs, which is trans exclusionary radical feminists, who are really radical in believing. Yeah. Oh yeah, you like the pun?
No,
it's women who have the radical idea that women are women, and that it's not something you can just put on as a man, that they actually view it as a form of misogyny.
Next thing you know, we'll be allowing women to define womanhood. What kind of world will that be when we have to listen to women instead of having men who think that they're women or are pretending to be women tell us what a real woman is? Come on, Joe.
The whole idea of sexual blackface, that you just get to become a sham of a woman. And this is, I think it's the semiotics of this sign that we're sending, that to be a woman. No, I want to be careful here. I don't want to go too far, because there are people who identify as trans who are not trying to do this, but there is a subset within the community who has a very vampish, very frankly misogynistic idea of what womanhood looks like, and it is this hypersexualized, kind of gross image of femininity.
Sure.
And so to dress up like that and say this is what it is to be a woman, women are rightly offended by that. That's gross. It's not right. And I think we can't just go on living a lie that we know isn't true, because a fair number of the people seeing this stuff are just saying the thing they know they're supposed to say, and they don't at heart actually believe there's no difference between the guy dressed up in drag and an actual biological.
But doesn't that make you think there's got to be an emperor's new clothes moment at some point? Doesn't there have to be? There doesn't have to be on many things, but on this, it seems like at some point there has to be a no. I'm sorry, but no.
There already have been, right? The high school teams in Connecticut or something where men are breaking women's records.
But like I would think a real genuine emperor's new clothes moment would be when NPR has to say, no, that's over. That moment that we lived through of madness about maleness and femaleness has passed, and we can look on that in our nostalgia issues, but not on our regular news reporting. We're not taking that view anymore. It seems to me that even that will have to come. I want to play a quiz game with you. A. Martinez asked a series of questions of the mother and daughter in this story, the daughter who is being presented as the son. And I want to see if the two of you can identify a common feature of the questions that the NPR reporter, A. Martinez, asked. Please play the audio.
So when you're playing with the guys, you would feel more at ease. That wouldn't be something you think about. You can just focus on the game and your swing and playing golf. I spoke with Luke and his mom, Shelley, about how it felt for them knowing he couldn't play the sport he loves on a team. When you realized that this was on the books and that you weren't going to be allowed to be on the team you wanted to be on, I mean, what did you think? What did that make you feel? And Luke, what about you? There's all kinds of bigger ramifications that are coming because of this. I mean, how do you feel when you're faced with that reality that this is something bigger than just playing golf for your high school sometimes? I mean, it stinks, but that's the world we live in. What makes you the most nervous about all of this? What is the one thing maybe you worry about the most?
All right, what's the common thread for every single question? That's not every single question. There were a few other questions, but this is certainly the predominance of the questions.
Well, he talks all about feelings.
Yes, exactly.
I wonder if those playing along at home noticed that as well.
The other thing
no
is
science, by the way. No science. I mean, I thought science is God now, but no science, nothing. How do you feel?
No,
every single question. How do you feel?
It's Rousseau. I desire it, so I have a right to it. So, but also in the first one, he sets up the answer to the question. He says how awful it was for you that you couldn't play on the team. Isn't that your answer? How awful it was for you?
Yeah. Well, that's the journalist knows the answer he wants. The journalist always knows the answer he wants. He just has to figure out how to get it. But feelings. Maybe we should, in order to build the rockets that we want to build, we should ask Mars how it feels to be in that orbit around the sun, and then we can get there. Once we, do you see what I'm saying? It's just a complete hypocrisy about, and I mean hypocrisy. That this claim of I trust the science, I believe the science, but when you actually get down to it, no scientific questions. That's not welcome here. What's welcome is questions about feelings.
Well, I'm reminded actually of the line in Planned Parenthood v. Casey, the abortion decision, which again is another just like totally throwing out the science on when life begins in favor of a feelings-based understanding of life and death. And in there, the court said, these matters involving the most intimate and personal choices a person may make in a lifetime, choices central to dignity and autonomy are central to the liberty protected by the 14th Amendment. This is the critical part. At the heart of liberty is the right to define one's own concept of existence, of meaning of the universe,
right,
and of the mystery of human life. So if you're going to be really
not
free,
at the
you
heart
have
of liberty.
to be free
That's
from
at the heart,
reality.
Yeah, that's at the heart of slavery.
Of chaos,
yes.
Right.
And it really is. I mean, it's not an exaggeration to call that satanic, because at the heart of Satan's kind of plan from the beginning is like he's not going to accept creation as given by God. He's going to invent or redefine it himself.
Non serviam.
There we go. Well, gentlemen, as always, it's fun. I will. Let's do it again. Will you both agree to do another panel show with me on a Friday coming up?
Absolutely.
Yes.
All right, and maybe we'll do a year-end review. As a matter of fact, and I'll get tons of audio from National Public Radio for the year-end review. I will just do a whole episode, the madness of National Public Radio, the 2021 edition. Joe Heschmeyer, the author of many things, including the brand new book, "The Early Church Was the Catholic Church." Thanks for being with us.
My pleasure.
And Chris Check, president of Catholic Answers. Thanks for everything you do to run the world's greatest Catholic apologetics.
Amen to that. Thank you, Joe and Cy. Both.
And And I would just like to end the week of Thanksgiving this way. Thank you, Jesus, for all the good gifts you've given us, including good friends we can have these conversations with.
That's right.
We'll see you next time, God willing, right here.